brothers and sisters of Africa, sons and daughters of the Sahel, and to the proud people of Liberia watching from across the Atlantic shores. Tonight, I speak not as a president or a soldier, but as a servant of our collective destiny. I speak to a continent that has been tested by centuries of division, deception, and dependency, yet still stands tall with unbroken spirit. Liberia, the land whose very name means freedom, was the first to raise the flag of independence on African soil. And tonight, from the heart of the Sahel, I speak to you, to your government, to your elders, to your youth, not with conditions, not with demands, but with an invitation born of conviction. Come, stand with us. Join the Alliance of Sahel States, the AES. Let us finish together what your ancestors began when they declared Africa's first independence nearly 2 centuries ago. For too long, Africa has been treated not as a continent of equals, but as a field of competition for the powerful. Our borders were drawn by strangers. Our riches were mined for others. Our leaders were taught to beg for what was already ours. But today, something different is happening in the Sahel. From Mali to Niger to Burkina Faso, the ground is shifting. The same soil that once carried the weight of colonial boots now carries the weight of history's transformation. We did not form the AES to create enemies. We formed it because our people deserved peace, dignity, and a future built by their own hands. The alliance was born out of necessity, a necessity to defend our sovereignty, to protect our resources, and to restore the pride that was stripped from our people. Liberia, you understand this story better than anyone. Your nation was built by Africans who refused to live without freedom. The spirit that guided them is the same spirit guiding us now. When I look at the youth of Liberia, I see the same hunger I see in the streets of Ouagadougou and Bamako. A hunger for purpose, a demand for respect, an impatience with a world order that was never built for Africa's success. And so I say to you, brothers and sisters of Liberia, our battles may be fought in different languages, but our struggle is the same. Our freedom is one and indivisible. Some may ask, why do we need alliances when we already have organizations? Why create the AES when Africa has the African Union, ECOWAS, or other regional bodies? The answer is simple. Because for too long, these institutions spoke the language of our former masters. They looked outward for approval while we, the people, suffered inwardly. They borrowed, negotiated, and compromised until our independence became symbolic. The AES is not a rejection of Africa. It is Africa refusing to be silenced. We seek not to replace unity, but to redefine it. We do not want empty speeches about cooperation. We want real cooperation, soldiers sharing strategies, farmers sharing seeds, scientists sharing discoveries. We want unity that feeds, educates, and defends. And Liberia, your participation would make that unity stronger than ever before. Imagine this, an African trade corridor linking Monrovia's coast to the markets of Niamey and the industries of Ouagadougou. Imagine a gold-backed currency issued by African hands, traded through African banks, and protected by African reserves. Imagine young Liberian engineers working with Sahelian counterparts to design roads, solar grids, and data networks that no longer depend on permission from foreign investors. Imagine the power of saying and believing, we can build it ourselves. Liberia's ports and position on the Atlantic make it the gateway between the Sahel and the sea. Together, we could create a new artery of African commerce. For centuries, our resources flowed out of Africa for others' profit. It is time to reverse the flow, to bring trade, technology, and opportunity back home. With your participation, the AES would no longer be a landlocked alliance. It would be an ocean-reaching bridge of African potential. To President Joseph Boakai, I extend my sincere respect and admiration. I know the pressures that weigh on your shoulders. Every African leader who tries to walk independently feels the hands that try to pull him back. But leadership is not about comfort. It is about courage. History will not remember those who hesitated. It will remember those who stood up when standing up was dangerous. I say to you, my brother, the door of the AES is open, not to divide, but to unite. Not to dictate, but to cooperate. Not to isolate Liberia, but to bring it home to its continental family. Let us create joint programs between our nations. In agriculture, to make food security our weapon against hunger. In education, to link our universities and build African innovation hubs. In defense, to train our young soldiers under the banner of African peace. In energy, to connect our electricity grids so no child in Africa studies under a candle while our rivers remain untapped. This is what partnership looks like when it is born from equality. To the youth of Liberia who scroll through their phones and wonder what future awaits them. Your future is not in the promises of the IMF or in the contracts written in Washington. Your future is in your soil, your seas, your skill, and your solidarity. Africa's liberation is no longer about guns and flags. It is about minds, machines, and management. The next revolution will not be televised. It will be built by engineers, coders, and farmers who decide to stop exporting their dreams. Our alliance has faced threats and sanctions. We have been accused of rebellion. But what they call rebellion, we call reclamation. What they call defiance, we call dignity. And what they call isolation, we call independence. Every step we take forward, they will resist. Not because we are wrong, but because we are finally right. We have stopped asking for permission, and that is the greatest fear of those who have ruled the world by controlling Africa's choices. Liberia, your history carries symbolic power. You are the child of return, the proof that even after the darkest night, the human spirit seeks home. Today, Africa is returning again, not through ships, but through solidarity. If you join us, it will not be the first return, but it will be the final one. The return of pride, of unity, of control over our destiny. Together, we can write a chapter where Africa is not a subject in someone else's report, but the author of its own story. We are ready to share everything: our vision, our strategies, our plans for an African monetary alliance that will replace external dependency with internal strength. We are developing an energy grid that will connect the Sahel's solar power to West Africa's coastal economies. We are creating defense systems to secure our skies and borders from foreign interference. But most importantly, we are creating a mindset, a belief that the African century has already begun. To our brothers and sisters in the diaspora, whether in the Caribbean, America, or Europe, know that Africa's transformation is not complete without you. Liberia's history is tied to yours. The same spirit that carried your ancestors home in the 19th century must now carry your talents, your investments, your innovations back in the 21st. The AES does not only belong to 3 nations, it belongs to every African who dares to believe in freedom without permission. Some will try to sow fear. They will say Africa is turning away from its partners. But let it be clear, partnership is not slavery. Cooperation is not control. We are open to all who treat us as equals, but closed to those who see us as clients. We want peace with every nation, but submission to none. We respect others' sovereignty, and we demand the same respect in return. In the coming months, the AES will hold a continental forum in Ouagadougou, Asamichi, dedicated to designing a roadmap for Africa's new financial independence. Liberia, your chair is waiting at that table. Come, bring your economists, your ministers, your visionaries. Let us discuss trade not in theory but in practice. Let us move from declarations to decisions. Let us prove that Africans can negotiate for themselves without translators of interest whispering in their ears. Our message to the world is simple. Africa is not seeking confrontation. We seek cooperation, fairness, and respect. We seek trade, not charity, partnership, not dependency. The AES stands for sovereignty. But sovereignty does not mean isolation. It means equality. It means being able to say yes or no by choice, not by coercion. It means standing tall at the global table not as beggars, but as brothers. Liberia, this invitation is not about politics. It is about posterity. It is about whether our children will inherit debt or dignity, whether they will see Africa as a supplier or as a power. Whether they will live in a continent of borders or a community of nations, the world is changing fast, and Africa must change with it, but this time on its own terms. I say this with humility and with faith. The 21st century belongs to those who take responsibility for their own destiny. The Sahel is doing it. You can too. Together, we can make history that our grandchildren will thank us for, not history that they will have to correct. I know that change is never easy. It comes with pressure, propaganda, and pain. But the harder the road, the more glorious the arrival. When Africa walks united, the world has no choice but to listen. Liberia, it is time to walk with us. It is time to transform the courage of your ancestors into the vision of your descendants. Let us meet not in whispers behind closed doors, but in the open sunlight of a new African morning. Let the flags of Burkina Faso, Mali, Niger, and Liberia rise together, not above one another, but beside one another, symbols of a continent rediscovering its voice. Let our children learn not about the colonizers who took from us, but about the Africans who built again from the ashes. Africa is not waiting for miracles. We are creating them. The AES is proof that when Africans trust each other, the impossible becomes inevitable. Our fight is not against nations, but against the idea that we are too weak to decide for ourselves. That lie has ended. The time for hesitation is over. The time for unity has come. So I say to Liberia, come home. The Sahel welcomes you. The Alliance awaits you. And Africa, patient, proud, and prepared, is calling your name. May God bless Liberia, may God bless the Sahel, and may God bless the rebirth of our beloved continent. He lowers his notes, pauses as the hall erupts into applause. The screen fades to black with the words, Africa unites, the new era begins. When President Ibrahim Traoré of Burkina Faso delivered his bold address, declaring a new era for Africa's independence, through the AES alliance, the world didn't just listen, it flinched. Within hours, reactions from Western capitals revealed both surprise and unease. In Washington, D.C., the State Department held an emergency briefing. A senior official described the speech as a turning point that could redefine Africa's balance of power. For decades, the United States viewed the Sahel as an aid-dependent zone, but Traoré's declaration that Africa would build financial systems free of IMF control challenged that perception directly. Analysts warned that if AES continues strengthening economically, it could inspire other regions to push for similar autonomy. One think tank report put it bluntly, Traoré's rhetoric may evolve into the foundation of a financial independence movement, one that questions Western economic design itself. Across the Atlantic, Paris reacted with sharper tone and visible irritation. French media branded Traoré's message a populist call to defiance, while officials inside the Élysée Palace privately admitted concern. A leaked memo from France's foreign ministry stated, the AES's expansion risks eroding France's historical and monetary presence in the region. This narrative, if left unchallenged, could permanently reshape Francophone Africa's loyalties. For France, whose influence through the CFA franc has been central to its African policy, the rise of a self-financed Sahel bloc represents not just political disruption, but economic retreat. Meanwhile, in Brussels, European Union diplomats debated quietly. Publicly, the EU issued a neutral statement supporting Africa's integration efforts, but internally, officials worried about a loss of leverage. One European policy analyst remarked, if AES succeeds in building trade systems independent of the euro and dollar, Europe's aid diplomacy loses its anchor. London took a more cautious approach. British media described Traoré's speech as an awakening of African populism. But behind closed doors, UK officials in West Africa were ordered to monitor increasing public sympathy for the AES model. A confidential briefing from London noted, Traoré represents a new archetype of African leader. Articulate, fearless, and digitally influential, the challenge is not his government's strength, but his message's reach. Within hours of the broadcast, The internet amplified his words across the diaspora. In Caribbean nations and African American circles, the speech trended on X and TikTok under hashtags like Traore speech and Africa Rising. Thousands of comments praised his courage, calling him the new face of African self-determination. At the IMF headquarters in Washington, the tone was defensive. A brief statement insisted the organization remained committed to supporting African development, but insiders admitted unease. He's telling Africans they don't need us, and they're listening, one IMF economist said privately. In Paris and Brussels, financial analysts echoed similar fears that the AES could inspire a broader continental movement to nationalize gold reserves, renegotiate mining contracts, and replace IMF dependency with an African monetary alliance. Not all reactions were negative. In Beijing, China's foreign ministry called Traoré's remarks a legitimate expression of sovereignty. In Moscow, state media praised him for challenging Western monopoly in African affairs. But observers noted, Traoré's focus wasn't to replace Western control with Eastern. It was to center Africa itself. In the following days, global markets didn't move, but minds did. African youth across cities from Dakar to Nairobi quoted his lines online. "We will no longer borrow what is already ours." His words became more than a speech. They became a rallying cry. For Western powers, the challenge was clear. It wasn't about Burkina Faso's military strength or Mali's mines. It was about a growing idea that Africa could redefine its value without external validation. As one senior European diplomat summarized, Traoré doesn't just represent a country, he represents a psychological shift. And that's what worries the West most. And in Ouagadougou, as journalists asked about the growing Western concern, a spokesperson for the AES smiled and replied simply, "Africa is not turning its back on the world. It's just facing forward for the first time."